have an interactive component, which I think is going to be really fun. So looking forward to that. I have a few thank yous. First, we want to thank Tony Tropy and Uncorked for hosting us. Philip Neighbors of the Mustard Seed Market and Cafe for bringing us awesome food in the back corner. So make sure to visit the bar, visit the food, and continue the conversations, after the program. The Akronist has come to record, so thank you for doing that. I also want to thank our planning team. Those that are on the planning team, why don't you raise your hands and just be acknowledged. Thank you for your efforts. And as you know, Gaines is a network. We're not really an organization, so you are here, you're now part of the network. If you have not signed up on our mailing list, please do so. Join us on Facebook. Really try and see how you might want to play a part. If you have a story to tell, grab one of us and say, hey, this is a really cool story that I can share, or I know someone doing fabulous sustainable things in our community, and we would love to be able to present and share those successes. That's how we all learn. It's all about making the connections and making the network happen. So at this point, if there is nothing else to be announced, I will turn it over to Beth Vild and Jessica Myers. Please welcome them.
Can you hear me okay back there? Awesome. All right, so I'd just like to thank you all for coming. It's a really great crowd. I'm really excited to see all these new faces here. So we're really excited to share our experience in Portland with you all. We've been talking about it for the last month, and I'm sure maybe a little bit too much with some people. But our intention here is just to inspire action in your own communities and help you get out there and empower your neighbors to make a difference in your communities. So that's kind of our purpose for being here. We're going to be talking about the city repair project, which has been going on in Portland for almost 20 years. So don't be intimidated by what you see here in our photos tonight. This is something that's been evolving over time. It's not something that happened overnight. This is a collaborative project that is highly influenced by the people involved in doing it. So it kind of takes shape and creates the identity in the neighborhoods that it happens in. There's a lot of reasons why we, choose to live in a certain city, and I feel Portland is offering us a really beautiful example of why it's successful and how we can apply that in Akron. It's not just about the aesthetic appeal of the city; it's about the range of services that are there, the community, the mobility of services, not just transportation-wise, but mobility and jobs, like being able to move around from job to job. So I'm just going to kind of start off giving you some context for why we chose to go to Portland to experience the city repair project and some background on the container for the city repair project. So we kind of look at Portland, this is my metaphor, that it's in bloom because it's like this bright, shiny thing that everyone kind of wants to go and experience because everyone hears about how great it is. It has a really strong identity. It's known as Portland, Portlandia, the hipster haven, the epitome of millennial cool. So they rank on almost every sustainability list, from bikeability, walkability, livability, sustainability, all that ability. They have really good waste management. The place we were staying in Portland, they don't even collect trash every week. They collect it about once every 3 weeks, I guess, and they do composting and recycling every week. So that's just one example of some of the things they're doing to kind of move forward in the sustainability movement. There's also the whole Keep Portland Weird thing. This is Darth Vader on a unicycle. In a kilt. And there was a video along with this of flames coming out of the bagpipes. I didn't know if we were on the internet or not, so I didn't include the video. But beyond the superficial statistics of Portland, there's a rich history, and the rich history, I believe, stems from the local food movement there, which I'm going to touch on. So For me, Portland is great because of the local food movement, urban permaculture, and civic engagement. So I'm going to get a little bit deeper in each of those topics. So, the local food. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but there's this whole food truck scene in Portland. There's over 600 food trucks. And this is just one expression of the entrepreneurial spirit that lives in Portland. Almost, I guess, 1 in 10 millennials is self-employed in Portland. That's pretty amazing. It's like almost double of any other city. But the food truck pods are like these conglomerations of self-employed people that just kind of get a food truck and they make their thing, and then they each have their own food truck in one lot. So there's these vacant lots that may or may not have any infrastructure built in. So the one pictured here took their porta potties and built them inside of a storage container, so it doesn't look like you're using a porta potty, but you are. And they actually had beer there. They had open container laws within these spaces. They had to be fenced in, but you're still able to serve the whole local brewery thing, which is really nice. Here's another picture. Each neighborhood kind of has its own food truck pod, and so it's kind of nice because it develops its own flavor in each neighborhood. Really, the neighborhood kind of contributes to the identity. So maybe one neighborhood really likes Indian food, so it'll probably have more Indian type foods there. Let's see. One of the coolest things about food truck pods is that these groups who should be competing with each other, if they were like restaurants all next to each other, you'd all be competing for the same customers. But what's cool about the food trucks pods is that they share a space, so they only have one basic seating area where people who can come and like get all their different foods and eat together. It's kind of like what the Mustard Seed's doing in the square. You can go downstairs and get your food at the grocery store and take it up and eat at the restaurant with people who are eating at the restaurant. So it's that same idea, just giving people a variety of foods so you can all eat together in one place. And it's the cooperative model of let's all throw in on the same infrastructure. Some of these places had like a really amazing tile and tents and really beautiful lighting, fire pits. So it's just bringing out the vibrancy of each neighborhood depending on what that neighborhood is into. Here's a picture of us enjoying a beer at a food truck pod called Porches. And they had an indoor seating area, so that time of the year when it's raining and cold in Portland, you can still enjoy these wonderful food trucks. And the picture on the right is showing the containers growing edible herbs right in the food truck pod, which was amazing. They had a loaded potato food truck, and they were growing like sage and parsley and all these herbs right next to it, so that they would then use in their food, which is really amazing. The whole front yard gardens is really huge in Portland. Everyone has a garden in their front yard. I just couldn't stop taking pictures of them. I have like a million pictures of front yard gardens. But this doesn't even establish as front yards of private residences. This goes on to City Hall. This is City Hall behind me. They're growing potatoes in burlap sacks and kale. I was just completely flabbergasted when I was waiting for the bus. Like, what? Even City Hall has a garden? Like, we need to represent this whole thing in Ohio. Like, if you're gonna, you gotta live by example. So if the government wants you to grow more food, why aren't they growing food? So this is a perfect example of how strong the local food movement is in Portland. So here's a couple of pictures of front yards. This one I walked by and I was like, this is so classic Portland with the prayer flags and the raised beds and rosemary hedge and all that. And here's another picture of a business which is actually growing grapes, and I believe they were a brewery, but I just thought that was really cool that even the businesses have front yard gardens. And I can't leave out the amazing farmers markets in Portland. Portland is surrounded by like a green belt, not just like parks, but they also have an amazing agrarian population. We actually went and visited, I don't have pictures here, but we went and visited Sauvie Island, which is only about 20 minutes outside the city, and it's the largest freshwater island in the country, and they're growing like amazing amounts of food there, and it's so close to the city. So a lot of the food grown in Portland, or that comes into Portland, is grown like in this radius around the city. We were talking to an ex-Portland a person who moved back to Akron about it, and they were saying that part of the great thing about Portland and why the local food has been so successful is because they're isolated. They can't rely on, you know, Cleveland or Columbus. They're just, Seattle's 10 hours away and San Francisco's like 13 hours away. So they are flourishing because of that isolation in a way. And this is just a picture to give you an example of the scale of the farmers market there. There's over 100 vendors, and this is on PSU's campus in downtown Portland. It happens every Saturday morning. It's bustling with people. There's I think about 4 or 5 musicians playing in each of the different corners where you enter, so it kind of like gets you into the vibe of the scene there. Yeah, the Portland farmers markets are just really amazing. Every single day of the week in every neighborhood there is farmers markets. So you can really like just see the scale there. And I just really want to touch on permaculture, because I really believe that Portland is exemplifying the permaculture values and principles. So I kind of just want to bring up that, I mean, it's really deep. But the first thing to know is that permaculture has a value system based on people and care for people, care for the planet, and excuse me. And the most important, I believe, is sharing the surplus. So that's kind of what influences a lot of these movements in Portland. Sharing what you have with others, and that's what builds community. So I'm going to go into talking about urban permaculture. So reclaiming space is one of the biggest parts of city repair, because we've lost a lot of our public space in the system we're living in right now, which Beth will get into more. So I just kind of want to talk about some examples of urban permaculture in Portland. You just walk around and you just see food growing everywhere, and that's great, but it just moves beyond that to observing and interacting with the space that you're living in. You're not just like letting things be if they're upsetting you, you're kind of like doing something about it. And the example on the right is a piece of street art that Beth and I did at request of a business owner. He had a cooperative studio on the end of this alley here. So he just kept having like all these semis and cars, you know, turn down his street, and there's no like dead end sign. So all these people are getting confused, like, why are we here? So he had us create this street art to kind of direct traffic around to the natural flow instead of just going into this dead end every time. So that's a really good example of people in Portland taking it upon themselves to do something that will help their community, however small. It's just make that little impact to make someone else's day better. And it doesn't have to be a dead end sign. It's a little like cute little cutout like comic book type thing. Another thing that's really amazing in Portland is their water conservation. They're trying to collect water here instead of just draining it away. So these are called bioswales, and this is another permaculture modality of water conservation. So you see here they're built right into the street, and they collect water and absorb water. I don't have a picture of it, but they also do traffic islands in the middle of the street. So in neighborhoods, they're trying to slow down traffic, because when you slow down the traffic, then you notice things you wouldn't notice before. You make it safer for bikers and people walking. So the traffic islands are pretty much in the middle of an intersection. It's just a circular planting type thing, like it's an island with plants in it. And you have to like drive around it instead of just barreling down streets. If you live in a neighborhood where there's a connector street, you know that like people just go 35, 40 miles down the street, and you're like grabbing your kids like, get out of the street. So these islands create a safer environment for kids, for bikers, all of that, and not just absorbing water. It's like multifunction, stacking functions we call it in permaculture. So here's a couple more examples. There's a way to share resources with a community message board on the right, and it has, or I guess it's your left, and it has a green roof on there. That's another permaculture thing. And then the other picture is of a cob structure that we just happened to walk by. And one amazing thing I noticed about the whole city repair thing is that when you do something in a neighborhood that sets an example, it kind of like has this rippling out effect where I noticed that when there was something in the intersection in a neighborhood, you'd see like mosaics popping up or street art or a free library. Like it ripples out. People really love what it does, and they try and recreate it down their blocks. So here's another example of sharing resources, the free library. They just set up a little stand and everyone puts out stuff that they don't really want anymore. And then the other picture is of, I just love this little girl with her little tail. But these bushes that she's pulling her little frisbee out of are thornless raspberries. So they incorporate food into their landscapes. So edible landscaping, we like to call that. So that brings me to civic engagement, which I believe urban permaculture, local food, all these things tie into taking it upon yourself to kind of create a solution. Because another part of permaculture is start slow, small and slow solutions. So localizing everything. I hope I can give you some better examples, but while we were there, a bicyclist was killed by a car driver, and literally the next day, the people took it upon themselves to organize a bike protest and went throughout the city declaring no more ghost bikes. And for those of you who don't know what ghost bikes are, when a bicyclist is killed in the streets, this group of people started painting them white and leaving their bike in the place that they were killed so that it's a reminder for cars, for people that you really need to share the road and watch out for those around you. So the civic engagement is really strong in Portland, and this is just one example of that. But that's just one example of how powerful it is when you get into a group with other people who share your same values, what you can do. And I just thought it was beautiful to see that. So civic engagement also relates to the participatory culture, and they go hand in hand. And this is all about creating, it's all about creating people who want to go out and do something to change their community versus someone who wants to pay for a service. You know, you can't get everything you want from the capitalist system. It's just not working. So it's just how do we create a system alongside that provides for the needs of people. So this is just a little bit of background on that, and I really want to highlight here the Akronists and the Devil Strip and kind of thank them for being here and recognize that the media plays an important role in shining a light on those activities which we think are doing good things for our community. So it's not just about doing those things, but it's about being able to share those and reach more, widen the circle. So I just want to thank them for doing what they're doing, because localizing everything means localizing the media too. Not as many young people read the newspaper, so if you're going to reach those young people, you need to use the internet and, you know, kind of evolve with how our culture is flowing. So here's a couple more examples of participatory culture versus consumer culture. The first one is an example of a free library. Someone just took an old mailbox and painted it and turned it into a free library. I mean, that's something you could do. Anyone here could do that tonight when they get home. Just cement a hole with a mailbox on it and a bucket and put it out in your neighborhood. The second example here is a tea station, the first ever solar-powered tea station, which Beth will talk a little bit more about Share It Square, but basically this is an example of providing a service and meeting a need in your neighborhood that, you know, a lot of our neighborhoods are really segregated from the business districts because we don't have mixed-use zoning here. So we don't have a place to just go get coffee in the morning and meet our neighbors. So this kind of provided that in this like isolated neighborhood. And then the far right example is a picture of the farmer's market. So there's about 10 or 15 food trucks at the farmer's market, and instead of, you know, giving you paper plates and styrofoam, they give you real dishes, but they ask that you return them in that respective bin. So each vendor has its own bin and its own compost that they go and at the end and collect. So instead of having someone come bust your table or giving you paper products, they're asking that you participate in making a more sustainable choice of using dishes and returning them to them. So part of being in a participatory culture and using civic engagement, we need to co-create an identity. And one thing that I learned by being in Portland is that they have a really strong, powerful, positive image of themselves. And it's not just based on the ghosts of industry past. It's based on, the nature around them. They call themselves the Rose City because they have a rose garden and they planted roses everywhere. Roses do amazing there. So does rosemary and lavender. But they just picked roses, and I don't really have many pictures of that, but I just was completely amazed by how prolific this idea has taken off there. It's really, really beautiful. They also are known as the Silicon Forest because a lot of the tech industry has moved north into Portland because it's a lot cheaper. They're also known as Bridgetown because they have rivers and there's all kinds of bridges. They're the brew capital because they have the most microbreweries of anywhere almost in the world. I'm not sure where Stumptown came from, but I just put that on there. And then the images on the bottom are just what I entered Google. I put in Google Portland, Oregon, this is what came up. And I put in Akron, Ohio, and the blimp came up. So I just wanted to give you an example of how other people see us. We also call ourselves the City of Invention, the Rubber City, the Polymer Valley, and I would just like to open the dialogue and what else we can call ourselves, like what kind of identity we want to have and how we want people to see us. It's not based on an industry. And this is just a little graphic that I really liked that the City Repair gave out on how to create a really amazing place. There's a lot of aspects to it. So that's the end of my portion, and I'm going to let Beth take over talking about the City Repair project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Read those 4 things.
Sure. So there's sociability, uses and activity, comfort and image, access and linkages. Thank you, Jess. So I didn't grow up in Akron, but I'm here. I grew up in a small town called Dover, which the question wasn't whether you had a garden or not. The question was whether you had a farm or not. So when I started doing work in Akron, I first started with a listening door knocking campaign through the Service Employees International Union and went on to work with the Way of Mind and Body, which is a Pan-African community center on the east side. And when I came to Akron, I realized that people were dying of food-related disease and illnesses, and not many people knew how to grow their own food. That grass was the #1 crop of Akron. And in that realization, I got deeply involved with the gardening and local scene, local food movement in Akron. And within that, I decided to get my permaculture design certification. Now, Jessica gave a great introduction to permaculture. Permaculture, in a lot of ways, started out as a rural movement, right? Because that's where a lot of food was grown, and it's about creating edible ecosystems, right? Instead of monocropping our soil to death, which is what we are currently doing, especially in this state. But I decided to get my permaculture design certification, and it was what I should have always been doing. When I took those courses, I realized a continuation of my calling in life. And during my class with the Green Triangle up in Cleveland, Mark Lakeman, who started City Repair, came and spoke. And when he came and spoke about City Repair, he talked about how he has been an architect for a long time, and he was involved with a firm that was undergoing a cover-up of a spillage in Portland, and he quit that architecture firm and then traveled around the world for 7 years talking to Native people around the planet about what was wrong with us, which is, I don't know about you guys, but a question I ask a lot. And people were saying a lot of different things to him, but mostly the reoccurring theme over and over again was colonialization, and that our people have forgotten how we've been colonized. So one thing that really stuck out for me was him saying, we have to remember how we've all been colonized, no matter your ethnicity, or where you come from, or where you've landed, or how your family got there. And the stamp of colonization from the Greeks onward is the grid. So you knew that a city was colonized if you walked into it and it fit along a grid. So the grid was put there in large part because it's a militarization tactic. You can see clearly down all 4 sides if you stand in the middle of an intersection. So if there's any sort of unrest happening, you can squash it. It's also was a way of commodifying the access to natural resources. So being able to take natural resources out of an area and very quickly take them out. And it also stamped out any local control of city planning and design, which also meant that there was no longer any sort of consideration for how wind moved, how the sun affected places, or how water ran through a place. It was also an end of cultural connection, especially when automobiles became the law of the road. People no longer congregated in the street, which is where people always congregated for thousands of years until automobiles came by and we said, you can't do that anymore. But the good news is that things haven't always been that way. This is Malta, Italy, and people actually used to design based on cultural fluidity. They would focus on common areas, as you see. So even the housing, the businesses, everything were focused around a common outside piazza or meeting place, what have you. They were oftentimes very circular in their design and would honor and respect local resources instead of trying to exploit them. So the local resources oftentimes would be tucked away in these areas that you would have to go through seeds of people to get to. Here's a great quote. I'm going to read it just because I don't think that everyone can actually see it. Without a center, a residential area may be a pleasant retreat from the world. The people may be friendly to each other, but for some social glue is still missing. The glue of shared experience, of serendipitous meetings, of a common ground that is neither your home nor mine, but ours. This whole idea that City Repair brings around, and they are really the leaders in urban permaculture, is around how to retrofit the grid. It's about creating social fluidity in inexpensive ways that are led by neighbors. Because they focus on intersections a lot of times. And part of the poetic reason they focus on intersections is because it's the place where our lives intersect. And what could be more sacred than that? So here we have some benefits of why we do they do intersection repair. So in part, it's to get to know your neighbors. So every area on along that intersection. All the neighbors are involved in the process. It helps create a neighborhood-based identity. Each one of these intersections has its own name, and actually creating street art on the ground helps people to create an image of an identity for their neighborhood. It's practical because it slows down traffic. So you're creating a public meeting space, but when people see it on the street, they want to get out of the cars and they're like, wow, this is amazing. Or they just slow down and kind of look at everything, right? It reclaims the public gathering space, obviously. Most of our neighborhoods are not faced with any sort of public gathering space any longer. And oftentimes the public gathering space that we have is along a very busy road that isn't in the niche of our neighborhood, so we don't feel some sort of identity with it, except for maybe Highland Square where traffic's almost stopped anytime you drive through it, right? And it helps people learn and practice new skills and be able to share those new skills and passions and interests with their community to help to build the community. So here are some examples of the street mandalas that City Repair does. And here's a great picture of people actually working on a street mandala. And the great thing about this is that it needs repaired every year. So your neighbors have to get together every year and repair it. And that's actually seen as an opportunity, because in permaculture we believe that part of the problem is part of the solution, right? So the fact that it's just made out of paint is actually part of the solution, because that means we all get together again and do it again next year and maybe come up with a new design this time, right? But it's also more than intersections. So they're developing into this thing called block repair, and this is the diagram of what they use for block repair. So they take a block and they put it in little, what an architecture firm would do of a 3D thing, but they do it for a neighborhood, which is not really done. And they take it outside and they compare how the sun would react to it at different points in the year, how the wind flows through it, and then they plan accordingly. And obviously you can't necessarily be knocking down these houses or anything, but you can figure out where the best place to put solar panels is, or for rain collection. Also, there's usually a place where there's some sort of childcare happening inside of it. People are knocking down their fences and creating pathways through their yards. There's oftentimes some sort of meeting space in the middle that they start to create. And then there's also mid-street repair. So oftentimes what the city of Portland has started, after 20 years of hard work from City Repair, Portland has started asking City Repair how they should change their zoning laws, which would be great here, wouldn't it? If the city asked us how would you like the zoning laws to be? We'd be like, oh, thank you, finally. So they just recently changed a zoning law this year when we were there, actually they had changed the zoning law in order to allow for mid-street repair, so now they can paint an entire street. And then also they cover everything in food forest edges, because what could be possibly more welcoming in your neighborhood than being able to eat along the way? And then they also, in the 90s, when there was actually vacant property in Portland, which there's not really anymore, they had park repair. So they would take over abandoned lots, kind of like the pocket park thing that West Hill and our dear friend David did recently, that they would take over an abandoned lot and turn it into a park. And oftentimes that park grew food and also would reflect whatever the wishes of the neighborhood was. So what they tend to do for this is to do pop-up to semi-permanent structures. So here's that tea station that Jess was talking about. And what they would do is they would do that in order to help create the elements of a good space. And some of those elements are something being a primary destination. So this is the piazza idea, the public square, the hearth. Also creating nodal environments like this cob bench right here that is somewhat indoor and outdoor, right? That makes people feel more at home and like they've got a niche, a nook to sit in. People really like that. Also creating places of memory, a place to sit, a place to drink, and of course, some place for public exchange. Also here you can see the construction of a cob bench that Jess and I were working on. This is a children's hut that they made. And then they're constantly urging people to be more involved, to grow the space, to make something new in the space. So this is some sort of weird cemented pole that says, what am I? What can I be? Right? They're constantly asking their neighbors for participation, participatory culture, right? But they also maximize their edges, and this is a big permaculture theme, that we have to, the edges is where the most juice is, the most creativity is. And here you have a beautiful archway at the Sunnyside Piazza that says hey, this is what our neighborhood is. Welcome to Sunnyside, right? Which is really important for any neighborhood's self-identity, is to have that archway. Also, any nook for art is a wonderful nook for art. So this is even a fence that just somebody started putting their artwork together as part of the fence, right? And then maximize your edges. Food forest, food forest, food forest, food forest. If you don't take anything out of this talk, please take away the words food forest. Thank you. But the most important thing, the absolute most important thing in this is about neighborhood relationships. So the difference between city planning that is hands-on placemaking and city planning that commits gentrification is about neighborhood's relationship to that place, to creating that place. So the way that they're able to do this is through the process that they go through. So starting in the fall until February, they accept applications for new sites, new city repair sites. And then in February till June, every other week, they do a combination of leadership development, community organizing, and design skills with that neighborhood, which is a whole conglomeration of different things. Neighborhood walks are a big deal, potlucks, being able to congregate with your neighbors and actually talk about the design process, about what people actually really want to see there. And then they also help to bridge that gap between the government and the neighborhood. But it becomes this process of that is, and then in May, and then in June, they do their citywide repair where each site works on their site, which is what we went to. And it's about creating a democratic placemaking in city planning. Neighborhoods resisting being manufactured and instead being intentionally designed by their neighbors. They use design as a tool for community empowerment instead of telling the community how they should look. But ultimately, the reward is the socializing and relationships made with one another in the process. So it's always about the celebratory culture that this participation encompasses. And on that note, we're gonna get to doing some placemaking because we are all hardwired placemakers, and if there's children here, they are especially hardwired placemakers, right? And so we are, oh, how many people would you guess that we have? Should we cut off into, what do you think?
Just do it.
8? Okay, so we're gonna go around the room and count off into 8, and I'm gonna put this microphone down, so you guys might have to pay attention and listen for a second.
2, 3,
4,
5, 6, 7, 8.
No, 8.
3.
Come around and give everyone a copy of an intersection. We're all going to have something that's a little different. And I don't want you to feel limited by what city repair does and just painting. I want you to think bigger. I want you to think like a kid. I want you to put ice cream stands in the middle of the street or cob ovens for pizza. Just don't limit yourself. Create your neighborhood nooks or your activated alleyway. So I'm going to come around and give those out, and you kind of just use your construction paper to recreate that intersection.
I'd like to report out what their group did first. Over there? Okay, number 5, here we go. All right, so our area is actually Joy Park. It's in East Akron. It's Chittenden and Fifth Avenue. And as you can see, we have a large area of just basic asphalt jungle there. So we decided that, just thinking about this area with Joy Park, there's a lot of children, a lot of pedestrian potential for that area. So we decided actually that we were going to actually create a roundabout instead for that area. So we're going to have a roundabout in the middle with green space and vendors and food trucks and activity going on. Actually, we decided that we were going to redesign the road and have it go on the outside of the park instead. We were going to divide this into 4 quadrants. So in each quadrant, we would have a row of trees. We'd have some tables. A row of fruit trees, a row of tables, a row of, and then we would have a row of gardens. And since it's divided into 4 areas, it would give opportunity for the neighborhoods to decide which quadrant they were going to be responsible for, and we would be able to get some identity from the neighborhoods and participation. So they would be responsible for just a 1 quadrant of this area. So having the tables there and the chairs and a walking path on the inside of this. If the road is outside, then we're going to have a walking path on the inside. So people would be able to gather. Kids would have some play space there. What else do I need to cover? Yes, we decided that we wanted it to be a larger roundabout so that essentially we were going to turn it into a neighborhood city center park instead of just simply a intersection. So we're trying to encourage participation from the neighborhood and encourage people coming out and really participating in that green space and owning it and building it up. So who would like to report next? Well, here, first of all. Who would like to report next?
Go ahead.
Okay, so you've got 2 minutes, just so you know. We'll do 2 minutes.
We just have to throw everything on there. We have an intersection in Middlebury, which is mostly open space, a lot of open space, a lot of big buildings. So we took that intersection and we drew down Market Street, East Market, by adding bike lanes, which are painted on, because it's Market Street. We did the same thing on the lower street, but because it's wider, we used concrete or a physical barrier for the bikes to be safer and to slow down traffic. We there's an area up here where it is a triangle, which there's nothing there, nothing. So we decided that's a perfect space to paint the street. And as people run through that intersection, they have a visual stop sign. We added in the triangle, all the green space, on one side we added benches and fruit trees because the idea of a historic forest in Middlebury sounds amazing. We suggested cherries, plums, and plums because we've seen them growing in Akron successfully, as opposed to something we don't know. And in the middle, there's a rain garden with a walking trail so that pedestrians don't have to go completely around the triangle to get to where they're going. They can go right through. The rain garden in the middle to draw them in, and they don't have to worry about crime or anything like that. I think they're taking a shorter but more scenic route to where they're going.
Looking for a more spiritual space here, and now only see there are green space, and I believe it's just tree cover. Because most of the street is covered with residential buildings and stuff. But we were thinking about, I know this is crazy, but one of our former mayors, I actually worked over at Dr. Bob's house, and one of the neighbors came across me bitching about the street being as a brick street. And bitching that the street was almost impassable because it was so. And our mayor, former mayor, I'm not sure who the mayor this week, said if he had his brothers, every single residential street in Akron would be brick because it's natural speed bumps. You cannot tear down the street on a brick street. You know. So we would like to bring back the brick streets. We have a lot of internet
area, about Howard and Edward, which is 1 block north of Cuyahoga Street, about 1 block north where the food market is, or the farmer's market on Sundays is.
So it's a neighborhood? Yes. Okay. So it seems like we have this piece of land here. So in the brief amount of time that we all had, we decided that this should be a pocket park. And so we named it Pocket Park of Peace and Love. And so what we did was we thought about a park for kids, perhaps a food truck, it's a gathering place, it's a gardening place, and perhaps it's a place that people will bring their dogs. So then we also thought that maybe the gardening, really, it should be created as an edible landscape type of thing, so that people can enjoy stuff, and there's sage.
It's South Akron near Summit Lake. We're pretty familiar with Long Street. So, great. What we decided to do, we'd like to do a little park as well, not necessarily a pocket park, but we did not name it, which maybe we should have thought about it a little more. We decided to put, we wanted to slow things down. So we liked the idea, of having the brick road, slowing things down. So we wanted to put a bike lane in. There are sidewalks already, I guess I can show you, if you can see, but there's sidewalks already there, but we wanted to add in a bike lane, just to increase traffic along this area. Another thing, and walkability as well. So we added in picnic tables, a couple of our
North Hill, and remotely, and I'm not really from Akron, but I live here now, and based on the feedback I got from my group, there is a school there. It's also a commerce area, it looks like, because there is a farmer's market that takes place on the corner. There's also a convenience store and a little Asian market, but it is very asphalt heavy. So we thought of looking where we wouldn't necessarily be alienating the convenience store or the other market, and looking at the way traffic is already flowing through there, maybe proposing where a community art garden would be, with raised beds so that it was handicap accessible and also friendly for children to walk through, and maybe get their attention before walking into the convenience.
Neighborhood is known as Goose Town. How can you not have fun when you get an intersection at Goose Town here? So this is Exchange Street and Grant. The giant university parking garage is on the north side. On the southwest would be a dormitory. On the southeast would be the front lawn of a dormitory. And that's pretty much it. It's a T-shaped intersection. It's heavily trafficked by students as they cross quickly, but we're going to change it to some painted geese in the road as opposed to white stripes. Exploiting that concept further, we were going to construct a goose pond here in the front yard of this dormitory. So right at that front corner, we're going to put a pond to collect water and to help with an herb garden that surrounded that, as well as a picnic area and some games to be played in that front lawn. We really got excited because then we were going to construct an archway from Grant Street has an island going down the center that divides the traffic on either side of the street. So we were going to grow some hops because up the street is Thirsty Dog Brewing and a brewery district, the old Burkhart breweries. So we were going to grow some hops up on a large archway that goes across Exchange Street and identifies this area as Goosetown with a welcome to Goosetown archway over the street. But we got to include the students. So on the parking garage, we were placing big green chalkboards like you saw in school back in the day. Big green chalkboards on the parking deck. And those are message boards and community message boards. You know, what did you learn today kind of a thing. So they're going to go all the way down that parking garage along campus. So it's community message boards, and in the dormitory across the street there's a courtyard, and we're going to put some gardens and edible food growing in that courtyard.
Central but not least.
Okay, group 3 had the challenge of the inner belt, Route 59.
What can't we do?
The best for last.
This gives us a great opportunity as Gaines to start thinking about this. If the city doesn't do anything for a while, there is the opportunity for placemaking and ideas. So I hope we can continue this conversation. But what we looked at, we have 30 acres of concrete and no neighbors. So this has to be a bigger project.
You're all neighbors.
Well, yes, no neighbors. We have to look at the whole city getting involved, and how can we look at that? So we first started out with parades, races, like an art car parade, bike races, rollerblading, running, bringing in, getting people downtown, getting them involved in these types of activities.
Kind of how like the High Line attracts people to downtown in New York.
Yeah.
Maybe we could use that as a gathering place for people in Akron.
Have pop-up restaurants.
I'm part of the League of Creative Interventionists, and we already have this hashtag thing, Create Akron, and we like to do just random acts of creativity around the city, whether that's weaving stuff through fences to put messages, like what would you do if you had more time, just stuff like that. So back to my thinking on creating a new identity for Akron, or just building on the identity we currently have. I want to create a new hashtag, Akron is, and I want you all to take the time this week to try and find something in your neighborhood or your community that you really like or you want to see more of. And hashtag Akron is public art, or Akron is sharing, and just show yourself having a potluck with your neighbors, like whatever it is. Hashtag it on Facebook or Instagram. I'm not really that like with Twitter or whatever, but I'm just trying to create a way for us to share and kind of highlight things that we want to see more of in our community. And that's just a way we can do that with the technology that we have. So,
and then also you're more than welcome to contact either one of us. This is our email up here. Feel free to talk to us afterwards. We are running a little over on time, I know, but it's worth it. But feel free to contact us. We'd love to continue this conversation. We'd love to sit down one-on-one with people and talk about your neighborhood and what you would like to see there, what resources you have, what you're interested in. We'd love to continue that conversation.
Akron is basically a screw you, shut up, and go away law. Because, no, I'm serious. They told us $2,000 at the end of the day to park in a public space in downtown Akron. It's $50 the whole entire city of Cleveland. So, this is great. I think this is wonderful, but I think, how much have we done with The people
So that is in the steps
are
that we
actually
want to
shutting
take
this down and
in the
saying no to this.
I just want to reassure you that that is in the steps that we are planning on taking in the next year. We're hoping to bring Mark Lakeman from Portland here to speak with city officials and foundations and things like that so that we can actually get some of this moving. And we can talk more about that.
Well, the truth of the matter is that outside
later.
perspectives weigh more heavily on those who are in power than people from within the city. Like, we keep having these people come with their fancy accents into Akron and telling us how things should be when we know how things should be because we're living it.
Yeah.
And I'm totally for mixed-use zoning, for allowing food trucks, so I think that it's the time that we work together to get these things happening in Akron because we're just going to keep letting all of our young people leave.
Yeah, but that's what happened. All the food trucks are going to Cleveland, they're going to Fairlawn, they're going everywhere that's more accommodating.
Sure.
And it's frustrating because, we need it here and it would be a good thing for us.
So we need to create the new civic identity in Akron that we are friendly with small business.
Yeah.
And that begins with food trucks, in my opinion.
And then you had
Years ago, I was working on green building in Cleveland, and no one would pay attention. So we finally decided to meet with the planning department and talk about this stuff. They gave us an hour. I did bring in someone from out of town. At 7 o'clock, we finished the meeting that started at 4. The point was, when they're limited to their own capacity to understand, they are limited to that capacity. If you can expand their capacity, as a result of that meeting, I was asked to do a series of sessions with all the planning department on new building systems. You do need that outside influence, that's no question, but bring those people into it because they are trapped in their own game and they don't know how to get out. They don't know how to get out. And if you could help them get out of it, they get excited about it just like you.
Can I get a show of hands who would be interested in bringing the guy who started City Repair into Akron? Okay, so I started a crowdfunding, everyone would throw in $20.
Yeah, because I'm sure once we can get them here, we can get the full-on funding for them to be active partners in us doing this. Samuel, I think you had a hand up?
Yeah. Just in regard to your comments about getting shut down, it's not unusual. All of the cities that are having great successes that we're looking at today started out with great resistance from their cities. What makes the difference are the grassroots efforts of groups, just like this group, persistently trying to get one small thing, another small thing, and having it grow, and the city starts getting behind it. 9 years ago, this city was not interested in even discussing green infrastructure. And if you read recently, they're talking about implementing 2 major projects of green infrastructure, but they were completely against it 9 years ago. Completely against it, turned their backs on it. So the point is that a lot of these things really need people like the people that are here to really chip away, to find a way to make it work, to find a way to start implementing different things. I mean, Art in the Park in Highland Square started that way. It started from a community garden that Sabrina and I were involved in designing that literally created community. It created a sense of place. There were so many restrictions on what could be done at that garden, and yet it still happened. And there were 100 people, 70 to 100 people. Sabrina says,
This is that it physically shows people how things can change. Because we can sit in rooms like this all day long and talk about things changing, but if something doesn't physically change, then it feels like it's never going to change. And, you know, one of the reasons that I moved to Akron was because when I was doing that listening campaign with SEIU, everyone, even after 30 plus years of disinvestment in a city, everyone still had so much hope. So people are having these conversations, they need to see the physical change, and this is why this is a good answer for this. And for another next step, we would like to invite everybody to our Big Love Potluck Family Dinner. So League of Creative Interventionists, Akron Peace Project, and HEALS are all a part of Big Love. We make up Big Love, which is a festival that is thrown the last 2 Februaries in the Musica Complex. And we are moving our wonderful community of people towards this mission. and going to be having that furthering this conversation, furthering what are our next steps, what do we do from here, right? Getting that democratic voices involved at Pure Intentions on August 8th at, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put the time down, 7 p.m.
So 6.
Okay, sorry, 6 p.m. And like I said, it's a potluck, but please come. We'll have time to socialize, celebrate, but also time to strategize and
Bring some
decide.
cans of paint if you have them. Let's just do the street art then.
But then also the other next step that we'd like to talk about, David Swirsky will cover.
Fair there. And that's part of a grant that I received recently and sent me to Toronto and soaked up this amazing inspiration and knowledge. So I'm really excited to get to work with everybody. And so I have, $5,000 that I want input in. It's like not just me receiving this grant, it's like our community coming together and saying, hey, we want this on this corner, we want this over here. So if we can show it to the city that we're doing this, and then they see it, they will sanction it. I mean, there's this great quote that I want to quote from the book Tactical Urbanism, and there's this continuum of all these tactics that they call tactical urbanism, from unsanctioned on the continuum to actually sanctioned by the city. Like they talked about in Portland, they actually wrote into their zoning laws, and they actually consult with city repair. So I mean, long term, you want to grow into that body.
This is really exciting stuff, and I think that there is opportunity. Akron is so well poised, the interest is here from the community, and I do think that our city is interested. Our leaders are looking to the residents. No, we aren't blessed with lots of money. No, we're not blessed with a huge population. However, I think that we keep it positive, we keep expressing and scheming and doing, working together in community, we can really start making the positive change and create the kind of community we want to live in, the kind of community we want for the future. Next month, we are going to have a meeting here again. I'm not sure if it's going to be downstairs or upstairs. And one of the things that you can also think about creatively in preparation for this, one of the aspects of the meeting is the Akron Art Prize.